Hey, podcast listening people, welcome to another episode of B2B Mentors. I'm honored to have you listening here. Grateful that you're listening. And you know the drill, right? I don't want to waste a lot of time because I have a celebrity, I would say business celebrity guest with me today. But please, if you find any value in this is free to you. And so make sure you share this. If not only for you, I guarantee you, there's someone else in your network who's going to get great value out of this. This is absolutely free to you. You can find the show on all your favorite podcast apps, video, wherever you like to watch video. And again, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to bring the man, the myth, the true legend, the speaker, the master. I'm going to read his bio and all that good stuff. But a true legend, Jay, so honored to have you here, man. And by the way, I forgot, I have an unveiling for you.
Oh, cool.
Okay,
right.
Before we dive into anything. So you're going to have to hang on here 1 second.
All right, I'm good.
Because I have an unveiling for you, all right?
Yeah.
And you didn't know I was going to be stripping for you.
I did not.
On this podcast, but...
Oh, yeah, I like that. I should be celebrating.
You had me at tequila, my friend.
Yes. I can make that happen. Here's just one of the 250 bottles I have in my office. The El Cristiano Reposado Extra.
Is that the current favorite on the roster?
No, I get that question a lot. What's my favorite tequila? And it's like, what's your favorite child?
It's just the one that's closest within reach to you.
That's literally it. The closest to my hand. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I was so tempted to be like, you want to do the podcast happy hour, whatever, but I know you're a busy guy. I didn't want to move it. So I just had to settle with the You Had Me at Tequila shirt. Those of you that are listening, I stripped for Jay and I'm now wearing You Had Me at Tequila. And we'll talk about that. Why is tequila relevant here? And Jay, who is a business growth, CX author, advisor, expert, author of 7 books, founder of 5 multi-million-dollar businesses. And I don't think you bragged about yourself enough in your bio. Like, I'm being genuine because you have done a lot more. I've looked up to you over the years. So it's really cool that we get a chance to connect here. Anything else I'm missing that's like relevant? Talk about the tequila real quick and give some people some context onto that. What's brought you in the tequila world too?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Arizona originally, so I've always been interested in tequila. I went to school in Tucson, which is right by the border. And it's been 25 years or so. I started getting into mezcal and tequila and other agave spirits. Just all kind of a hobby, and I've been down to Mexico a lot of times and visited producers and all that jazz. And when I sold my consulting firm a couple of years ago, and I stopped doing my weekly podcast, Social Pros, which I did for 12 years, I said, hey, I should take the time that I used to spend doing this podcast. And what if I just tried to teach people some things that I have learned over the years about tequila? That was the full strategic brief. And pretty quickly, it went kind of bonkers to the degree that I am now, by most accountings, the number 2 non-celebrity tequila influencer in the world, and have hundreds of thousands of followers on tequila for Instagram and TikTok. And it's funny, Connor, I've been a B2B author, expert, advisor for 30 years. I've been doing tequila for 14 months. And every time I'm in an airport, somebody's like, oh, you're the tequila guy. Nobody gives a shit about the 7 books I wrote or the companies I started or the brands I've helped. That they care a lot about me being a tequila reviewer. I'll tell you that.
That's crazy, man. Give yourself some credit. You are a celebrity. And what's so fascinating about your career too, and in the world we live in now, there's a lot of influencers out there, speakers, right? They're kind of, I would say, theorists. It's so easy to just start putting content out. You get on a stage and so on. But you've been a real business practitioner over the years, and I don't think a lot of people may recognize that or understand that. Talk a little bit, because it's kind of behind the scenes. What are some of those companies that you've built up over the years, either exited, maybe you still hold some of them, and what are they?
Yeah, I mean, I started literally 30 years ago. I started in digital in 1993 when domain names were still free, and ran a digital company, helped run a digital company very, very early days before even we had browsers. Did that for a bit, and then started a big content company that had lots of local news and information, ran that for a while, then started a digital strategy company for a few years, sold that, and then started Convince and Convert, which is probably my most well-known consultancy. Started that in 2008. won lots of awards, incredible client lists. We've worked with 40 Fortune 500 brands and many other household names, helping them with digital strategy, CX strategy, social strategy, content strategy. Almost every major B2B SaaS company has been a client in the last 10 years. And it's been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it. But, the way I come up with books is exactly that. What I do is I listen to questions that clients ask. And I say, well, wait a second. If Oracle doesn't know the answer to this, nobody does. And if they're asking, then somebody else surely must also want that answer. And then I'll go out and do research to try and find the answer. And then if it's interesting enough, I'll turn it into a speech. And I'll do the speech 30 times. And then once the speech is really good, then I turn it into a book. So what most people do is they write a book and then they write a speech. I write a speech, make the speech great, and then write a book based on it, which is why my books tend to have a little bit more of a narrative flow than some other business authors. So that's kind of my process. And I just keep, every 2 years, I figure my goal is to figure out what B2B or B2C, but more B2B businesses can use as their competitive advantage for like a 2-year window. And after that 2 years is up, I stop talking about that or talk about it less and talk about what the next thing is, because it'll change, right? You do a thing, competitors catch up, you got to do a different thing until they catch up again, right? So people in the speaking world are always like, well, Jay, how come you always have different topics? And I'm like, well, because I've been a strategist for 30 years and a speaker for 13. Like, to me, all this is consulting with a microphone. And I wouldn't tell a client the same strategic plan 8 years ago versus now, right? I mean, I can be like, all your money on Twitter. Like, it's, it's just like things change, right? So you got to change right alongside.
Is the time to win, like a lot of this study, are you gearing, like, do you want to be heavier into the consumer side versus B2B? Like moving, are you finding more interest there? Like, and is that the time to win new book and also the study, which is really fascinating. People should go check that out. Is that really consumer based for the most part?
No.
Or for B2B?
No, the new book is called The Time to Win. It's all about the relationship between responsiveness and revenue. And it turns out that all customers, doesn't matter if it's B2B customer, B2C customer, all people care about time more than ever, right? We care about our time and how we spend it more than ever. There's a lot of reasons for that. 2/3 of customers say that they now care as much about speed as they do about price. 2/3. So there's lots of different tactics and techniques you can use to outperform your competition in the area of speed and responsiveness. So that's what the whole new book, The Time to Win, is about. And it is not by any stretch of the imagination B2C focused or B2B focused. It is business focused, because a lot of this is consumer psychology and consumer expectations, and it doesn't matter. And in fact, I would argue, even though sometimes the sales cycle is longer in B2B, the level of urgency is higher. Does that make sense? Right. So you
100%.
know it's going to take longer because it's enterprise and there's paperwork and there's stakeholders and there's bullshit. So it's going to take longer, but all that means is that you carry that urgency with you longer. And in B2B, because the stakes are typically higher, right? You've got a higher average order size. You've got fewer chances to switch because switching costs are higher, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to get it right. And B2B is sort of a retention game, or at least it should be a retention game. One of the things I talk about a lot in the book is the notion that it's not just about being fast when somebody's shopping for a provider. We interpret speed as caring, right? So when somebody's faster, we think that means that they care about us and our business more. So you've got to be responsive throughout the entire customer journey, because this stat is incredible. 85% of customers say that speed is a critical factor in their brand loyalty. So it's not just about being fast when they were shopping. It's about being responsive to their needs. If they've been a customer for 6 months or 6 years or 60 years, you got to continue to be fast, because eventually they're going to say, should we switch providers? And how responsive you are has a big role to play in whether or not they switch. So if you want to get new customers, be faster. You want to keep your customers, also be faster.
What is it, that speed, like what allowed you to kind of hone in on that? Talk Triggers, it's one of those arenas. Was it feedback from that book initially, and it's like, wow, this really seems to be an angle that I need to focus into?
Actually, I've all the books that I've written have talked about speed, at least in part, right? The Now Revolution was a lot about speed. more internally focused. Utility talks about speed. Hug Your Haters talks about speed. Talk Triggers talks about speed. So everything I've ever done has focused at least a little bit on speed. But
Which makes sense, because I mean, you talk fast, you act fast. It totally makes sense, man.
yeah, but what we discovered, sort of my hypothesis was, coming out of the pandemic, that kind of changed everybody's relationship with sort of time and what it means to them. And so what I started realizing before I did the research, and kind of why I did the research, I said, there's all these trends right now that people are talking about, right? The Great Resignation and quiet quitting, and people wanting to work from home and not wanting to come back to the office, and bleisure travel, which is where you kind of take your kids to the conference, right? And you kind of like double dip the trip, right? All of those trends are the same trend. My observation was that all those trends are the same trend, which is that we care about time and how we spend it more than ever. And I said, well, I think that might be true, but one of the things that I am very committed to is I won't tell people something unless I know it to be true. So I will always go spend the many, 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 many thousands of dollars to validate it with real university level unimpeachable research. And so I did that. I did the biggest study ever done in this country on speed and its impact on business.
It's the biggest, study.
Thousands,
That's wow.
thousands of consumers.
Yeah. How'd you just to pause you for, because a lot of other marketers, businesses are thinking from, like, I'm looking at a high level view now of like, how do I kind of execute what Jay's done to build a brand and to get customers and to get on stages? Like, how do you go about executing those, funding those? Like, just a high level. I was really curious to learn about that.
So there's several different research companies I've worked with across different projects and different books. And I've done a lot of research all the way back into my college days. I was a political consulting major, so I've done a lot of polling work and things like that. And so I know a fair bit about research. And so I always partner with a research company who really does it, for a living. And we write the instrument, and I always want to do research that's pegged to the US Census. One of the biggest problems in B2B research is that people do research, of their own customers, or of, marketing directors who are between the ages of 35 and 54 in Tennessee or whatever, right? So the sample size or the sample filter is kind of misleading in a lot of B2B research. And so I feel like you're better off having a broader, more pegged to the census type of a respondent pool. So that was what we typically do. And it's not hard. It's just expensive, right? You gotta work with people who really know what they're doing. There's a big difference between, no offense intended, like a Survey Monkey and a real university kind of level research project. And then the art is kind of knowing, once you have the data, the art is kind of figuring out what that data means. Like, what's the pattern? And that's just one of the things and that's
tricky because that can be interpreted so many different ways and so quirky. Are you using a lot of outside to do it, or just from you looking at it at a high level, figuring out how do I distill this down? Like, how does that work to get good, accurate data? Because there's a lot of bullshit data out there that I did this study on this and this came out and
I know the data is good because I'm using real experts to do the survey, so I know the data is clean. It's one of the things that I am actually good at is pattern recognition. So I can look in the data and say, okay, here's the story in this data, and how to pull that story out and tell it in a way that makes sense. But I always validate it with other friends. I've got several other colleagues that do market research professionally in this kind of work. And so I always say, here's what I think this means. Do you disagree? And so I always validate it with other experts. And again, the data is the data, but you can make data tell a lot of different stories if you want to. So then once that story is kind of codified, then I always create a big research report, which you can find at thetimetoWin.com. And then once the research report is out, then you start to write a speech based on that. And one of the mistakes people make, Connor, is they're like, okay, I've got a 30-page research report, right? Some sort of downloadable PDF or interactive infographic or whatever you're going to execute it. And then they feel like the speech has to be the whole report, right? And then what happens is the speech is way too overstuffed with facts and information. And it's just like a fire hose of data. No one wants to hear your speech of your Excel doc, right? It's dumb. So one of the best lessons I ever learned was many years ago now. My good friend Scott Stratton, who's a fantastic public speaker, better than I will ever be, said, Jay, however much content you think you need to have in your speech, you only need half of that. Because as somebody who's been a consultant a lot longer than I've been a speaker, I always have a bias toward, let me tell you more. And he's like, the better speech is to tell them less, right? Have fewer points and air them out and have more examples and just more space, because the human brain can't like take in information, at a massively rapid pace for an hour or 75 minutes or 90 minutes, however long the speech is. And so it was really good advice. So
Although when you're on stage, it's like, that was 5 minutes. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So I try not to replicate the whole report in a speech, right? So
Yeah.
the speech is definitely the highlights. And then, as I mentioned, if the speech is good and I get it to the point that it's good, then if I feel like, hey, people really like this topic and it's still true and meaningful, then I'll turn it into a book, which is what I've done, which is the book will be out soon, theTimeToWin.com. The book this is not a mock-up. This is the actual book. It is
I know. At first,
small.
he was holding it up to me. I was like, well, I've never physically met Jay in person. I don't know if he's very large
giant.
hands. And
He's giant.
Bigger than life.
People say, Jay, what are you compensating for? Why is this book so small? And it, the book is about
it's confidence. That's pure confidence right
exactly.
there. You go for a small book.
That's right. Look, the book is all about speed and the fact that being faster will create more revenue for your company. And so I thought it was really like ridiculous to say, hey, read a traditional 225-page business book for 6 hours about speed. It just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So we made a small book that you can read in 45 minutes or an hour. But what's great is a few people have gotten early access to this book, and they say there's as much value in this as there is in a full-length book, and that's exactly what we were shooting for. So
I want to hone on that for a second. I love watching your gears turn and how the marketing mind really works. And this is so key, like what you mentioned, even from a speech or from the TikTok era that we live in and Instagram. And I know personally too, like I could talk on camera on stage for 2 hours straight, like no problem whatsoever. But when it goes to distilling that down into smaller pieces of content, and also companies like, hey, we need a white paper. We want it to be 25 pages long and it's just like packed full of data, or we're doing this long form stuff. We really are in that micro, bite-sized pieces, which surprisingly, as you said, it is so much more difficult to convey information like that when you're the one getting that information out there. So how would you recommend marketers listening, business owners, like take really important principles and be able to distill that into micro videos, micro content, or even just distill it down into general? Is there a process you go through? Is there a thought behind it?
Yeah, actually, yes. It's easier to be, okay, how do I want to explain this? It's easier to be tight when you write. It's harder to be tight when you're talking, because our natural linguistic patterns add in a lot of context, parenthetical information, filler words, etc. So when you're trying to be brief, you just say, okay, I'm going to give myself a word limit, right? So you get 150 words, period. And you write a script, right? That's 150 words. And that becomes the video, or that becomes the audio clip, or that becomes the short form social media post, or whatever it's going to be. But you really kind of have to give yourself a word count. And I think it's much easier, especially starting out, to do it with a word count and a script. So even in my tequila business, we do 4 videos a week on Instagram and TikTok. It's TEQUILA J Baer. And when I started out, I've done years and years and years and years of B2B focused longer form videos, YouTube and what have you, podcasting, etc., where you've got somewhere between 5 and 60-minute episodes. And what works on Reels and TikTok is 90 seconds or less. So I had to retrain my own head to be able to execute videos in like a minute 28. And so for the first 4 months, I actually wrote out every word of every video to make sure that I could get it done in a minute 28. Now I kind of have the timer in my head and I can do it without actually writing it out. but it was a real adjustment for me to be able to communicate with like that much brevity. But once you start doing it for a while, you realize like a lot of the stuff you think you need doesn't actually matter, right? It's not, it's just, it's like, you know, like sometimes you get a Christmas tree and it's got like so many ornaments on it, it actually looks bad, not good, right? That's how I think sometimes we over communicate, especially in B2B. Like, look,
Big time.
page count is not a success metric, right? This is not a volume play, right? It's not about how much content you can make. And that is particularly salient advice now, because as everybody starts to harness their AI robots, everybody's just going to be like, we can make the most content. And I'm here to tell you, nobody gives a shit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much content you make. Don't fall into the trap that B2B has already fallen into. I already see it happening, man. They're falling into this trap that volume plus mediocrity equals success, and it doesn't. It's not going to work like that.
Yeah, I've asked Robert this question. We were talking about before Robert rose this question. I'm curious on your perspective on this in that world, from the studies you're doing now, all you've done in B2B over the years. What's something you've held as a long-standing belief about B2B marketing and sales that maybe even in recent month, 2 months, you've like pretty much changed your mind on?
Interesting. That's a good question. Something I've changed my mind on. Well, I guess I would say this. I didn't necessarily change my mind, but it certainly reiterated something that I've thought about for a long time, and now I really believe it's going to become even more true, which is that strategy is king, right? Like in a world where everybody has the same robots, you cannot conceivably out execute your competition. All execution will be commoditized, right? Whether you can make 1 million blog posts or 2 million blog posts or what, it doesn't matter, right? Like you cannot win with volume. And so the only way that you're going to be able to leapfrog your competitors is to have bigger and better ideas. And it has to be bigger and better ideas that an AI tool won't come up with. It has to be like weird enough or non-linear enough that when you feed it into the machine won't come up with that because it's just too weird. So weird is going to win. And as somebody who's always been pretty irreverent about marketing, I am pumped for this new era. And
My dude,
B2B is so conservative, right? It doesn't mean boring to boring. It doesn't mean boring to boring, but so often we think it does. And the B2B companies that are going to really succeed in the next, year to 3 years are going to be the ones willing to roll the dice and do something cool.
I think that's such a key point. I really hope that resonates. And in Talk Triggers, you've talked about, I think it was a wood manufacturer or something. It was one of your first stories. So I imagine you wanted it as a flagship story in there, and they were putting stamps on their call, whoever to get a free t-shirt. And they were blowing up in deals. And those creative dynamics, I can't agree with you more. As social media is more commoditized, we can create infinite amounts of content. So how can people, just businesses, like trying to figure out how to form this question? How can we really tap Talk Triggers, or maybe some unique examples of that's my question, recent Talk Triggers that other people can look at or study or understand or should maybe consider?
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about Talk Triggers is the good ones last forever. Right. I mean, DoubleTree's been giving out chocolate chip cookies for 30 years. Right. And it still works today. There's a plumbing business in California, Los Angeles County, called Mike Diamond Plumbers. And they're a pretty big plumbing company, but plumber's a plumber, right? It's not like it's just a difficult business because it's not like somebody's got like a magic wrench. They all kind of do the same thing, but they have an amazing word of mouth configurator. They're called Mike Diamond, the Smell Good Plumbers. So each plumber on their team has a signature cologne. And so when they come into your home or your office, they actually smell great. If you look at their Google reviews, it's amazing because they've got like hundreds of Google reviews. And it always says like, man, he really did smell good. Like it's so awesome, right? But it's the weirder, the better sometimes, right? And B2B doesn't have to be so boring and conservative. There's like this viewpoint that, well, if we do something kind of interesting, like, people will think it's frivolous and we won't be enterprise class or whatever. That's just dumb. like, all those B2B buyers are still people with natural human emotions, and they get delighted and surprised and awed and excited and interested the same way as if they're buying a fucking snow cone.
So it is in general, like, I'll give you an example. We had a client of ours, they sent Atari games, like the old school Atari games,
Love
to CTOs and CIOs. Like, is that an example of, these are corporate, dry, like, very personable, the IT suite, and it blew up. It went crazy for them. Is that a good example of like how we can make B2B more fun? And is it something physical, mailing?
It doesn't have to be.
Where else have you seen other good ideas, like on the corporate, dry, stingy level?
Yeah, it can be anything. I mean, typically what you see in the real world is you typically see physical things more often because it's easier to kind of contextualize in your head. And it's often easier to operationalize, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like you can actually create conversations with a lot of different things that aren't just, free stuff, right? So like there's an accounting business, all kind of B2B accounting business in Indianapolis that creates conversation just by being faster than people think. So they have a 5-minute response time for an accounting firm. Like that's crazy. Like I've had like a lot of accountants in my life, and they never call me back in 5 minutes, right?
2 years later.
Yeah, exactly. I mean but that's their whole thing. They've engineered their business to be the fastest, and people talk about it all the time. They just decided that's going to be their thing, right? And so you just have to decide what your differentiators got to be, and you got to be pretty consistent with it. Like in B2B, a lot of people get messed up is they treat it as a one-off, right? They think about word of mouth as a campaign, and it should be the exact opposite, right? It should be something that sets you apart for the long haul.
So where else besides the word of mouth? Because you can only build your business so much in B2B through word of mouth. Is there one other area that you're observing right now is like almost every B2B marketer should be looking at this, entertaining this as a channel or an avenue? And it may be something historic, like everything's cyclical, right?
Well, this is a boring answer, but I think it's customer success and customer marketing.
That was too boring. All right.
Especially in, what people are predicting to be an uncertain economy. I haven't really seen evidence of that yet, but people are running a little scared. The last thing you want to do is lose clients. And it's as somebody who wrote a book about customer success a few years ago, it's nice to see B2B in some cases, and certainly not all, start to value retention and really start to put their money where their mouth is, and hiring better customer success managers and having better customer success processes and even bonusing teams based on churn reduction, not just on new logo acquisition. So it's great to see the kind of philosophy around that change. Even unified GTM teams, right? Where it's like, look, we don't have a sales team and a marketing team and a customer success team. We have a let's make money team, which is exactly how it should be. Like, why do the salespeople get bonused if you get a new client? But then if we lose that client, like we're just spinning, we're just on a treadmill, right? It's dumb.
Yeah.
So just structuring the business so that we're all in this together, because it's so crazy to me, Connor. Like everybody knows this. You learned this on the first day of business. Like you learned this before lunch on the first day of business, that the best way to grow a business is to not lose customers, right? It's to keep the ones you've already earned and not have to constantly replace them. We all know that, right? But day to day, we behave all the time as if that's not true. And it's crazy to me, but I'm starting to see it. Like in B2B is actually way, way better at this than B2C in terms of really valuing customer retention and funding it in a way that makes a difference to clients, right? To really say, hey, we're going to deliver a customer experience throughout the journey that is of a requisite level of polish that it reduces churn. And to me, the big difference maker in B2B is to stop thinking of customer service and customer experience and customer success as a cost and start thinking about it as to what it really is, which is an investment in the growth of your business.
I love that answer. And it's absolutely not boring. I have a mentor that says like boring is what gets you to the bank. And we're always looking at all the shiny new objects syndrome, shiny object syndrome, and everything, especially as marketers, right? And the tried and true always seems to work. Before we wrap up, I got to ask you on this 1414, Tapatio, Chamucos, Don Filano, El Tesoro. Those are some of my absolute top favorite tequilas ever. Is there anything out of that list that I'm missing and I have to go after?
Well, you talk about 1414, Vivanco, they have a brand called Viva Mexico, which is very hard to find in the US, but they are embarking on a new initiative, which is actually unfolding right now, to expand their distribution in the US dramatically. It's a really good tequila in sort of the Tapatio style, although obviously a different distillery, reasonably priced as well. So look for that one. Viva Mexico will be coming to stores near you soon.
Have you heard of Sip Tequila?
Of course, they're a partner of mine.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, I ordered my dad the subscription and everything. They've put out really interesting tequilas. He was bonkers about those. We're both huge tequila fans, so that's why, of course, you had that tequila. And Jay, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with me today. First off, everybody, the book, theTimeToWin.com. So make sure you get that, and that'll be launched here officially. You can go pre-order, get the micro version. You said you may just give the audio away at some point, so we'll have to stand by for that.
Yep.
I'm an audio guy, so
it's short enough. It's short enough. You can just call me. I'll read it to you.
That works. I will. Be careful what you wish for. Only if we do it over some tequila. And then anything else for you, top of mind, resources, relationships, connections that you are looking out for right now, we can connect you with.
Absolutely. Folks, go to jaytequila.com, jaytequila.com. That's my list of recommended tequila brands. And that will put you on my list as well. And I will send you information about tequila sometimes. jaytequila.com.
jaytequila.com. Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate you. All of you listening, much love to you, my friends. Make it great. And make sure you share